It's happened at 5 in the morning. I heard some explosions and I didn't believe, but in my heart, I realized that the war started because Russia attacked several Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv. Even one bomb came maybe a couple months from our house, but didn't explode. It, praise God. But some bombs came around Kiev, and Russia tried to bomb to attack military bases and some infrastructures. And just in my feelings, I heard that something happened. I went to gas station uh, to get gas, and there were a lot of cars already, and many cars were driving from Kiev because they got from news information that Russia attacked Kiev. And then I put gas. I stood maybe 30 minutes in a line, then came to buy some food, and I stood 1 hour in a line just to pay for food. And again, credit cards didn't work, just people needed to pay cash. And then from early morning, situation became worse, 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 and we get new and new information that Russian troops already came to Kherson region and took some parts of Kherson region where my relatives live. They took Chernobyl nuclear power station, and you can imagine what bomb Putin has in his hands. And I think really he had this plan. The last information we got from news that 18 big airplanes from Russia are flying to Kiev, and they will be here. I don't know, maybe in 15 minutes, and probably they say there are special troops that want to be sent from airplanes to Kiev to to come and get governmental district to take control, to take control on the government. And I am surrounded with some suitcases, and I checked bomb outside our bomb shelter outside our house. You can just, it's like in a dark dream. We cannot believe that it is happening. Just pray for Ukrainian army, pray for big leaders in other countries that God draws them to do what they need to do in order to stop this war. In order, because we hear already about Ukrainian soldiers that were died, and Russians also, and big battles going on around Ukraine.
Good evening. That was our TBN colleague, Vitaly Stebanov, who was forced to record this piece earlier today, right before he and his family hustled off to a bomb shelter for the night. Yes, a bomb shelter. Brave soul, born in Russia, married to a Ukrainian woman, and we're going to hear more from him shortly. And while there are lots of high-level maneuvers going on globally, we're going to focus a lot in this program at ground level with the people, where it's raw and where it's all too real. Good evening, I'm Mike Huckabee, and we're interrupting our regular programming on TBN again tonight. For the people of Ukraine, it was not just their programming, but their entire lives were interrupted very early this morning when the former KGB Soviet leader began invading their country. Bombs, troops, tanks, weapons of all sorts raining down from not just the border areas, but across huge parts of the country. By any standard, it was a very strategic and a very large military invasion, one that has shaken people all over the globe, not just in Ukraine. And not that it was ever in doubt, but it's more clear than ever that nearly every single thing Vladimir Putin has said in the past many weeks leading up to this brutal attack has been an outright lie. Joining me again, anchor and reporter Doug McKelway. Doug?
Thank you, Governor. Good to see you again, albeit under these adverse circumstances. Governor, I'm surely one of many people who can say that they never thought that they would see such a day as this, the beginning of another war in a part of the world that has worked for generations to live productively and to live safely with their families in peace. And now that has happened, another war. What else might be just around the corner in the eyes of world leaders who are not interested in a world where people prosper? For example, what are the Chinese now thinking about their expressed intention to reclaim Taiwan? Well, we're going to cover it all in the next hour. We begin with a TBN colleague of ours, Erick Stakelbeck, who has the up-to-date information on the attack, the U.S. and the world response, the sanctions, and more.
Hours before dawn on Thursday, Russian forces invaded Ukraine, mounting an assault by land, air, and sea in the largest attack on a European state since World War II. Missiles rained down on Ukrainian targets as columns of Russian troops poured across Ukraine's borders from Russia to the east and Belarus to the north. At the same time, Russian forces landed on Ukraine's southern coasts from the Black Sea and the Azov Sea. Russian military vehicles also crossed into Ukraine from Crimea, which Russia annexed from the Ukrainians by force in 2014. Ukraine's defense minister said Ukrainian units, military control centers, and airfields in the country's east were under intensive Russian shelling. Military command centers in Kyiv and the city of Kharkiv in the northeast have also reportedly been struck by missiles, as has Ukraine's eastern Donbass region. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky said his troops were trying to fend off Russian forces attempting to capture the Chernobyl nuclear power plant just 60 miles north of the capital, Kyiv. In an address to the nation on Thursday, Zelensky called on any Ukrainians who were able to defend the country to come forward. He said Kyiv would issue weapons to all who wanted to use them to defend the country's sovereignty.
Видаємо зброю і будемо видавати для захисту нашої землі всім бажаючим, всім спроможним захищати наш суверенітет. Від кожного громадянина України залежить майбутнє нашого українського народу.
Meanwhile, leaders from around the world were quick to condemn Russia's actions and call for a decisive response. Speaking from the White House, President Biden announced a harsh new round of sanctions against Russia and criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin for his, quote, naked aggression against Ukraine. NATO's Secretary General condemned what he called Russia's reckless attack on Ukraine, warning that it puts at risk countless civilian lives.
Peace on our continent has been shattered. This is a deliberate, cold-blooded, and long-planned invasion.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said there was no justification for Russia's military actions in Ukraine, while French President Emmanuel Macron addressed his nation on Thursday, vowing to back sanctions against Russia.
The events of this night are a turning point in the history of Europe and of our country, and there will be consequences. There will be long-lasting, profound consequences on our lives.
NATO members agreed on Thursday to bolster their forces and deploy additional defensive forces to nations in the eastern part of the alliance. As for the people of Ukraine, they were faced with the overwhelming force of a deadly Russian attack, the sound of explosions and air sirens, and then panic hit the streets. Traffic gridlock formed from the center of Kyiv towards various exits out of the city. People took cover in underground stations and other safe places, while others scrambled and formed long lines outside of ATMs, supermarkets, and gas stations in preparation for the unknown in the days ahead.
Well, a very keen observer of the Russian leader is journalist Stuart Smith. He's joining us from Moscow tonight. Stuart has been covering the Ukraine crisis from Russia for months now and is joining us live. Stuart, we're grateful to have you here. Give us some indication of what's the mood of the people on the Russian side of this conflict.
Well, it's very different, I would say, depending on who you speak to. Let's start with the people that came out earlier in Moscow. Around 1,000 people seen on the streets here protesting against war, holding up signs saying that this was not something They're angry with the Russian President Vladimir Putin for taking these steps, and they will not be silenced into allowing it to go ahead without their voice being heard. However, quickly these people were rounded up, as it is illegal to protest in Russia at the moment. The government here citing COVID-19 legislation as the reason behind that, but clearly the true reason being that Putin does fear an escalation of the domestic civil situation as well as one in Ukraine. Those people, the latest figures we get from an independent NGO that monitors the number of people arrested at these mass demonstrations, estimate around 1,800 people have been detained for protesting across 50 cities in Russia. It's now very late here in Moscow and those protests seem to have died down, but it cannot be ignored. There are people that do closely follow Russian state media and will be believing the narrative the Kremlin is presenting about events today, which is that Russia is engaging itself in a humanitarian intervention to defend the people of the newly recognized separatist republic against Ukrainian aggression. If you watch state TV today, you would not have had a greater sense of all of the other action Russia is taking across western Ukraine, so close to the capital, Kyiv, and also you would come away with the sense that what Russia is doing is part of a noble fight to tackle neo-Nazis in the Kyiv government and also to protect civilians from unjustified attacks by Ukraine.
You know, Stuart, for most of us in the West, it's surreal to think that the Russian people are being fed the kind of information that would say that there are Nazis running Ukraine when the president of Ukraine is Jewish. I don't think anybody would mistake a Jewish man for a Nazi. So it's just astonishing that the state-run media clearly is willing to just tell things that clearly aren't true. But do the people of Russia just accept that? Do they believe it?
Some people do, and this isn't a new thing, to be clear. The propaganda related to Nazism in Ukraine, the allegation that Ukraine has been committing genocide in these regions, very, very poorly substantiated and obviously faked evidence in the last few days around that claim. But it is what people hear day in, day out on radio, newspapers and television. And a poll to give you a sense of how many people are going along with this. The most recent polling we have isn't about the invasion itself, but about Russia recognizing those regions of Ukraine as independent, these self-declared regions of Ukraine as independent. The state pollster put support around 73%, but of course take that with a huge pinch of salt. But an independent pollster put support for that move around 45% of Russians. So still a large population do believe that what Russia is doing is on the right side of history.
So are there other forms of information that the people of Russia can get that would give them some indication that universally across the world, with the exception perhaps of communist China, there is universal condemnation of what Putin is doing and how it's creating an extraordinary dangerous flashpoint for the whole world?
There has been in the last year an unprecedented crackdown in modern Russia on media, and media outlets that do receive any form of foreign funding, $1, will have to label themselves as working on behalf of foreign agents. There's Soviet overtones to that. It means that they're working on behalf of enemy countries. But there are outlets that people can access in Russia, even without VPNs, to gain information which is far more nuanced, far more balanced, and far more accurate, in my view, about the situation. So they can access these sites, but the Russian state has done a good job in denigrating them, labeling them foreign agents working on behalf of enemies of Russia, like the United States, United Kingdom, Western leaders. And so these sites in themselves, these journalists, these outlets, have already for a while been branded as in effect spreading Western propaganda. And so especially amongst the older population, I would suggest, who still rely on television and traditional forms of media, well, that is a different situation. On TV, you will not find those opinions. On newspapers, you will not find those opinions. It's only the modern news sites, which of course lend themselves far more easily to the younger generation.
Stuart, we only have about 20 seconds left, but if you could just give us a sense. President Biden has announced significant sanctions against Russia. Are any of those being felt yet in Russia and among the Russian people?
Well, the sanctions themselves, I would say no, but the immediate reaction in the stock market has plummeted to unprecedented lows, around minus 30%. The ruble is on unprecedented lows against the US dollar, and all of that will have an effect on the ordinary person, with food prices very likely to rise substantially on top of inflation pushing prices up already in Russia. Imports will become more difficult, and also these sanctions are targeted at oligarchs indeed, but they will have broader repercussions for Russian society. One interesting thing, though, the Russian president himself sat down around 30 to 40 top business leaders at the Kremlin itself that they need to stick with this, that there is a plan and that Russia will support these businesses in the face of these sanctions.
Stuart Smith, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you joining us, and best of luck to you there. Now we turn it over to Doug.
Joining us now is Captain Chuck Nash, U.S. Navy retired, a former F-18 pilot and an F-18 squadron commander. Chuck, thanks very much for joining us again. First, I want to get your take on what you've seen in the invasion thus far. What are the takeaways? What are the tactics you're seeing that strike you?
Well, I think what Putin is trying to do is, much like the Germans did in World War II, a blitzkrieg. Just throw everything at him right up front. He could have done one of his options, none of his options, some of his options, or all of them. He's chosen to do 3 of the 4. He's come in from Belarus, he's come in to the northeast, and he's come in from the south. But the main event would be coming back into the Donbass, which is where the major defensive lines are. So that, he's holding off on that, and I think the reason why he's not going in there full speed is because he's waiting to see what kind of success he can have and how much of the forces maybe that he could draw away from that area, because that's where the Ukrainian forces are entrenched. And so that's going to be his toughest slog.
I'm hearing anecdotal reports. I heard one from General Jack Keane on Fox News earlier this afternoon that the Ukrainian army and military is putting up a stiffer defense than many had expected. Some of these regions. Are you hearing anything to that effect?
Yeah, absolutely they are. And that was anticipated. And President Zelensky said to Putin when the threat was still live, before he actually pulled the trigger on this, he said, if you dare invade us, you will see our faces, not our backs. So he was saying, no, we're going to stand tall, we're going to fight you tooth and nail, and we're going to make this so painful for you that we will make you withdraw. And even if you conquer this country and get the government to topple, you're going to be fighting an insurgency just like you fought in Afghanistan. So Putin's vision of maybe being Peter the Great again, and I've heard that mentioned by some folks, that's going to fall flat on its face if he winds up getting bogged down. All of his future aspirations of putting together Imperial Russia are going to fall apart. There are already demonstrations, believe it or not, in Moscow, in Russia, where thousands of people have come out and they're demonstrating against this war. That takes a lot of guts for those people.
Your point about a long-term insurgency is really key here, especially in light of the fact that the citizenry there in Ukraine is now armed. The government has been providing ordinary citizens with weapons and ammunition.
We've been, since 2014, this is a completely different army than what happened in the Donbass and 2014 in the Crimea. Completely different. The United States has pumped in about $2.5 billion worth of aid. Other countries have done the same. And they're a well-trained and disciplined organization. And just to run the numbers, about 260,000 active duty, a couple 100,000 reservists, and 400,000 veterans. So those veterans, these people who they're passing arms out to, aren't 18-year-olds with no training. A lot of these guys are in their 30s, 40s, maybe even their 50s, but they know how to fight because they've been in combat, and now they're getting weapons back. Putin has bit off a lot here. He really has. And I don't think even his successes that he has right now with this, oh, well, he stormed through here and he's captured Chernobyl. Great, he captured a nuclear wasteland. Good for him. You got to sustain that effort. And once you start going further and further, your supply lines get stretched. And that's where an insurgent army and the regular army and the reservists and everything, that's where they start cutting up those supply lines and isolating you. And this is a lot different. It's not just going into Rhode Island. He's gone into Texas.
Using your crystal ball, looking into your crystal ball right now, what do you expect to see in the coming days?
I expect to see the effort kick off to the east in the Donbass in Sincere. I mean, that's going to be hard and sloggy and miserable. I also expect to see the NATO General Council meeting tomorrow, and they're going to try to figure out what can we do to help them, given that Putin has already come up with a threat that said, hey, if any of you guys decide to jump in here and get involved, you're going to really suffer greatly. So he just finished a nuclear exercise. I think that was kind of a backhanded threat that, I do have nukes. However, these NATO countries, are they going to allow the U.S., for example, to fly in more anti-tank missiles if you have to fly over German territory or over Polish territory? The Germans have already said that we're not for throwing the most severe sanctions down on Russia. So they were the ones, remember, who were most generous in offering the Ukrainians helmets. So we'll see what happens in the NATO General Council meeting tomorrow. That is going to be a big tipper as far as I'm concerned.
Right, and to that point, Putin has already said after he launched this military operation, to use his words, that if the West tries anything in terms of military retaliation, they would be met with, and I'm paraphrasing here, previously unseen retaliation on part of Putin. To me, that suggests two options. You just mentioned one, nuclear weapons or a nuke. The other one is unprecedented levels of cyber warfare. Which is the more likely and which is potentially more dangerous?
I think the cyber warfare is more likely because you start popping nukes off and the whole world's going to go crazy. I mean, it will be immediate retaliation and nobody's going to win in that scenario. However, once you get into the cyber aspect where you're bringing down water systems, electrical grids, our modern Western society, and even the Russian society, they're not used to dealing with that. We're used to flipping on the light switch, having it come on, and having 4 bars on the Wi-Fi. So you start pulling all these things down, it's going to change our way of life. And one of the things that we have to think about in this country is our power grid. Even though we have said Congress has voted year after year to upgrade the power grid and protect it, we never do.
Last question, we've got a minute or so left. What do you make of China and what they will do, how they will perceive of this Russian operation and whether or not they attack Taiwan? It seems to me that the timing is just exquisite for them.
It is exquisite for them, and time is not their friend, to your point. The longer they wait, the worse it gets for them. But if they were to do it, talk about being bloody, they will lose a tremendous amount. And I think what they're trying to do is see, how does the West really resolve itself to stand against Putin, and what kind of success does Putin have? If he is successful and he can cower the West, it might incentivize them. But I think they are in a wait and see mode. They're not ready to jump across the South China Sea, because Taiwan, there's another force that's been upgraded over the years thanks to some U.S. assistance.
Thanks very much. We're out of time. Appreciate your expertise.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Doug. Well, from the military to the diplomatic observations, Ukraine is the big issue tonight. But take a look at this. It's a cartoon from the Wall Street Journal. It was published under this headline. It said, "The two-headed fight for Ukraine and Taiwan." Indeed, a lot of people are wondering if Taiwan is next to be attacked now that the Chinese leadership has seen the flawed U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, as well as the Russian takeover of Ukraine, or at least the attempted takeover. Here to discuss both, we're joined tonight by the former State Department spokesperson, Morgan Ortagus. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. I want to get right into this because I think all the attention right now is Russia and Ukraine, but the fact is, do you think President Xi in China is taking a real good look over at Taiwan saying, this is my chance?
I am certainly concerned about that. Listen, I think President Xi Jinping started looking at this leadership by President Biden, this failed leadership, I should say, especially starting last fall, last summer, whenever we saw the terrible, disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I think one of the reasons why you're seeing so many people act out in different theaters is because early into his presidency, Biden was tested and he came up lacking. It has been a weak and failed leadership at home and abroad. So listen, one of the things that we know is I believe it's in November later this year, there'll be another party Congress of the Chinese Communist Party in which Xi Jinping could get another 5 years or could get, who knows how long on his tenure. He certainly wants to be emperor for life, as we've always sort of joked. So, as you watch world events, I don't know how quickly Xi Jinping would make a move on Taiwan. It would certainly be devastating if he chose to do so now. Because we would see actions breaking out in multiple theaters, right? Not only Russia, Ukraine. I mean, you now have a land war in Europe. I'm not convinced. If you're Israel and you're looking at this and you're looking at next week, the Biden administration potentially going back into what President Trump described as the worst deal, the JCPOA. If you're looking at that, and you're looking around the world, you do not see a president that has your back, that's going to stand up for you or stand up for American greatness. So we could have conflicts in multiple theaters around the world, and I think it's a very concerning time.
Morgan, I've been to Taiwan on many occasions over the past 30 years, and one of the things that I've noticed is that the Taiwan people, they don't see themselves as sort of a renegade part of China. They see themselves very independently. They're overwhelmingly grateful to live in a free country where they elect their leaders. They have built an incredible economy, but there has to be a real sense of anxiety in Taiwan as they're watching these world events take place and wondering if China were to decide to make their move, what would the U.S. do? What do you think the U.S. would do?
Yeah. Well, you have hit the nail on the head, and we have left for years, for Republican and Democratic administrations, we've had this policy of strategic ambiguity as it relates to Taiwan. The one China policy is still technically in place. Now, you'll remember quite well when President Trump came into power, before he even was inaugurated, he started making, aggressive moves towards supporting the independence of Taiwan. We have a lot of issues with Taiwan, principally, and you know this, you've reported on this before, and having been there, you know about the chips and semiconductors that are made there, that the world is dependent on. And you obviously have a country, or have a place, well, I guess we don't technically consider it a country, although we probably should, but you've got a place, like you said, where they consider themselves to be very independent. They are trying as best they can to arm themselves. But the stark reality is, if the Chinese decided to come in tomorrow, they could overwhelm Taiwan militarily. Exactly what we're seeing Russia and Ukraine happen today. Ukraine, we have armed them somewhat. They have the will to fight. They see themselves as an independent nation and democracy, which they are in Ukraine. But there is the reality of there being a significant geopolitical military force on their doorstep. Listen, it's even more troubling in Taiwan, because if the Chinese do decide to take military action in Taiwan, that would severely hamper world trade. They would effectively sort of corner the real estate, the Chinese would, in that part of the world. So that would affect American businesses, that would affect supply chains, and that would have a devastating domino effect for our allies in the Indo-Pacific. So the world needs, what the world needs is a tough, strong president like we had under Donald Trump. This administration, Governor, is obsessed with hashtags and obsessed with giving speeches and patting each other on the back and diplomatic receptions in Europe. But that is not enough for dealing with dictators. And the American people also need to be in the fight. Listen, I'm in the military. I'm in the Navy Reserves. I've sworn an oath to protect this country, and I'll happily do that should I be called up to do so. But I think the American people need to understand also what's in it for them as it relates to what could be a potential fight for Taiwan.
There was a real mixed message, Morgan, that came out today from the press conference that the president gave. And he said that, and I'm going to quote here, no one expected this, the sanctions, to prevent war. Now, that is a direct contradiction to Vice President Harris, who about a week ago said that the sanctions are a deterrent. And even some of the mainstream press that typically never says that Joe Biden has made a mistake, they were scratching their heads and saying this is a real mixed message. So how do you interpret that? And which is it? Do sanctions have an impact or do they not? Because there's been a very divided message coming out of the same White House.
Well, it's eerily echoing what we just saw about 7 months ago in Afghanistan, right, Governor? How many times did we hear President Biden say, well, no one told me that Kabul could fall this quickly? And that clearly flew in the face of the intelligence community and the military leaders' assessment of how quickly, rapidly the Taliban was taking ground in Afghanistan. So I think that we have a lot to be concerned about here. I mean, you don't need to be in the intelligence community and seeing classified information to be able to see the buildup of Russian troops on the border of Ukraine and the threats. It was patently obvious what they were going to do. Listen, I worked sanctions for a long time, and I'm really glad you answered that question. You know, the problem with this administration is they focus all of their efforts on sanctions. Sanctions should be a broader piece of the pie, right? It is not the sole use. It's not the sole ability to change a country or change a dictator's behavior with sanctions alone. It should be a part of a broader, comprehensive strategy. And I think that the main problem that I see, and Mike Pompeo, who I worked for as Secretary of State, he often said, we have to approach the world realistically. We have to see it for how it is, for exactly how it is, not for how we want it to be. And the problem is that the left in this country, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, they constantly have looked at Putin and Xi Jinping as rational actors, you know, and that they think that they're actually worried about what's said about them in cocktail parties, right? And that's clearly not how Putin thinks. So just as President Obama underestimated ISIS, remember in President Obama's term, he called ISIS the JV squad. You know, this team, the same Obama team is around President Biden. They tend to have a lot of bravado, a lot of hashtags, a lot of impassioned speeches, but they come up short whenever it actually comes to deterring aggression, right? So this whole exercise the past few months has supposedly been about intensive diplomacy to deter Putin from acting militarily. Well, they have failed in that exercise.
Morgan, it is great to talk to you always. Thank you for joining us and getting your insights from both the military and State Department perspective. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you, Governor. An important question is, what should the U.S. president do? What could he have done to perhaps affect a different outcome right now? Also up for debate is the question of whether the Chinese leadership is watching Russia and Ukraine to determine whether Taiwan would be an easy target now, too. Joining us tonight, Republican Congressman August Pfluger of Texas, who represents 29 counties in his 11th congressional district, and which happens to be in the top, and this is very important, the top oil and gas producing region in the nation. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The president announced new sanctions, as you know, among them against the company and the owners of the company, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which goes across the Baltic Sea, under the Baltic Sea to Germany. But the important thing about this to me is that he lifted those sanctions last year. Last May, he lifted the sanctions. So it may have been one step forward on Wednesday when he announced the new sanctions, but it was two steps back when he lifted the sanctions in May. It just seems completely topsy-turvy to me.
Well, you're absolutely right. And when you think about energy security and understand how important it is to a country's well-being, their survival, their quality of life. When I sat across from President Zelensky just a couple of short weeks ago, he talked about the role that Nord Stream plays in this, in the potential invasion, and this was before it happened. And he said that without Nord Stream, that Putin and Russia would not have the leverage to be able to invade. And that's how important the discussion has been for a year plus. I mean, we have been urging the president for months to be strong, to act from a position of strength in sanctioning Nord Stream and sending a clear signal to Putin and to the Russians that it's not okay to put a stranglehold on Eastern Europe, specifically on Ukraine. That's exactly the situation we find ourselves in. I recently introduced Midland over Moscow. It requires a full sanction of the Nord Stream project. It also requires the White House to come up with an energy strategy to let Americans know not only how are we going to fulfill our domestic needs, but how can we also help our partners and allies? And we have enough resources to do just that.
Some have already said that Putin has factored in the cost of sanctions into his war calculus here, and he's determined and found out that he can survive sanctions. Do you concur?
Well, I think there's a lot of justification to that. He's got almost $700 billion built up in reserves. And so I think his calculus has, everything has kind of come together. When asked why would the invasion be now, the Ukrainian leaders, including the president, said because it's an environment of weakness. And so the calculus is not only on that environment of weakness, but also on their financial situation where they can weather the storm.
You've been at the forefront of pushing for U.S. energy independence. As we said, you represent a district which has more oil and gas producing facilities than anywhere in the country. Your view of the Biden administration's pullback on U.S. energy independence, apparently in pursuit of greener technologies?
Well, I think you just have to take a look at the comments by the energy czar today, the climate czar, John Kerry. And in the midst of the human suffering and the tragedy that we are witnessing, the whole world is witnessing in Ukraine, with real lives being lost, John Kerry is saying we need to keep our eye on the climate task. And so, the administration's priorities are completely misguided here. What the president should have been saying today is, I would like all the oil and gas companies in the United States to ramp up their production, to increase our domestic production and our capacity so that we can help our allies and partners in Europe. That's the right path that we should be taking. We do it cleaner, we do it more efficiently, we do it more affordable. And not only that, but you don't have to be dependent upon a malign actor like Putin or like China. And guess what? China is watching. And that's the real issue here, is that China is now calculating whether or not we have the resolve. And it starts right here inside our borders and obviously expands outside of our borders as to what that security level will be.
Mm-hmm. You just said that the Biden energy policies are misguided, but many Americans on the left think that those energy policies are perfectly well guided. And I hearken back to a statement that was made by then Obama Energy Secretary in the early stages of the Obama administration. His energy secretary was Stephen Chu. And he said, in order to make renewables, wind and solar, competitive with fossil fuels, we would have to find a way to get gasoline up to $7 a gallon. Well, we're not there yet, but on the way down to the studio this afternoon, I was paying $4.19 for 93 octane. We're moving there. And do you think that could be possibly part of the strategy? I'm not saying for war, but to get gasoline prices up where renewables become competitive?
Well, it's a good question, and I'm not so sure that they actually have the ability to strategize that deeply. But it does make you wonder. And the other aspect of this are the subsidies that go to those other sources. Now, look, I come from a district. We've in this segment made it well known that the Permian Basin is the most prolific oil and gas producing region in the country, if not the world. What the other fact from my congressional district is that we have more wind energy than the entire state of California. We have a tremendous amount of solar energy. And so we know about energy in general. And the other piece of it is that we know about what provides baseload capacity for the electrical grid and what does not. Natural gas is a baseload provider. Wind and solar are not, because they're not reliable. And that's what Europe is now going through because of their misguided policies. And so when I talk about misguided policies here in the United States, it comes down to that one question of when you need electricity and when you need power, it needs to be reliable and consistent. The Germans are dealing with this, and a lot of Europe is also dealing with it because they've made decisions that may have been a little too fast for what the markets could support.
I see. I want to shift gears right now to China. We've had two previous guests comment on the prospect of a China invasion of Taiwan. What are your thoughts about that and that prospect?
I certainly think that they're looking at this environment and they're gauging and measuring and calculating what the resolve of not only the United States, but our allies and partners around the world would be. And they've got a couple of data points. I'll start with our own border security, which is obviously lacking. And that sends a clear signal that we may not be willing to uphold law and order right here. That's my opinion as well. Then you go to Afghanistan, a botched withdrawal. And lastly, we get to the point where we're now dealing with Ukraine being invaded by a sovereign country, being invaded by Putin and Russia. So you have to think that China is definitely looking at this time period and thinking that this might be their opportunity. We must send a clear, strong signal right this second when it comes to sanctions in Russia, that it must be crippling to their economy. The cost must be so high that nobody in the world will ever forget it, especially the Chinese, so that they will not make this move. That's what needs to happen.
Congressman August Pfluger of the 11th District from the state of Texas. Really appreciate your time and your perspective. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. Well, before we take a short break, let's go back to our earlier guest, Vitaly Stepanov. He spoke to us from Kyiv earlier today, not because he was otherwise busy, but because he had to leave his home for a bomb shelter. He was born in Russia and married a woman from Ukraine. So we asked him specifically about Putin's warlike methods and how he and his friends are still managing to keep the faith, even during an attack. As we said, he's a brave man with a deep faith.
We heard a couple of days ago that he said that my interest was only Donbas region. I would never come to other Ukrainian part. He lies all the time. We cannot trust him, and he doesn't worry about people. Yes, we hear kind of these things that they won't attack civil people. We understand, but when it's needed, they can, like today, if you watch Ukrainian news, you can see videos how Russian troops attacked different cities and civil people died already. Their bombs came into buildings, private buildings, big buildings, maybe occasionally, but it happens because it's war. You cannot control this situation, and we should be ready to protect. And we don't trust Putin's words. He sent his tanks, his soldiers, his, I don't know, descent, like special troops, are 10 kilometers from Kyiv. They came and captured a special airplanes base, and there is fight right now with Ukrainian troops. 10 kilometers. Many people are hurt already, even civilians in many parts of Ukraine. Now many churches provide online services, but some churches gather, like our church gathers together during a week, and the church is open. Now church is like a shelter also. For example, our church bought a lot of food for people in order, if they come and spend time there, they can have food, or if they need food, they can take it and go home. We had a plan how to help people who cannot move, for example, or in bad physical conditions during war. We had special meetings, and all other churches. And what I can add that I didn't add before, all Christian world in Ukraine, all Christian denominations, leaders, churches, they are united. They were united before war started, and now there is big unity. And even we heard before war started, many soldiers, they were asking for Bibles, and even Bible became, or people started to buy Bibles before this war happened. And now we believe people are open to pray, and we believe that only God knows how to stop this war. That's again and again we ask America and other countries, just do what you can, pray for Ukrainians, and just lift up our hands to Almighty God, who controls this situation. We believe in it.
It's a quiet night here in Jerusalem, but make no mistake, the shock waves from Russia's invasion of Ukraine are being felt here and throughout the Middle East. In my conversations this week with current and former Israeli officials, they said that the world's inability to stop Vladimir Putin, combined with America's Afghanistan debacle last summer, have only emboldened Iran and its terror proxies in this region. And as Putin menaces Eastern Europe, he's also been very busy here in the Middle East. Thousands of Russian soldiers are based next door in Syria at Israel's northern doorstep. They arrived in 2015 and have helped Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad prevail in that country's bloody civil war. The Russian presence in Syria has created a dilemma for Israel. For the past several years, the Israel Defense Forces have conducted airstrikes in Syria against Iran and the terror group Hezbollah. So far, Russia has stood by and allowed these Israeli strikes to take place. But there are signs that Russia could be losing patience. Earlier this month, a Russian foreign ministry spokesperson called on Israel to stop its airstrikes in Syria. Meanwhile, Russian and Syrian fighter jets recently conducted a joint patrol near Israel's Golan Heights. Israeli experts I spoke to seemed confident that Putin would continue to allow Israel to operate freely against Iran, and that Russian and Israeli leaders have an understanding when it comes to Syria. Yet they acknowledged that Putin may have larger ambitions beyond Ukraine. Perhaps those ambitions extend even beyond Eastern Europe. Just last week, the Russian military held its largest naval drill here in the Eastern Mediterranean region since the Cold War. This is Erick Stakelbeck reporting from Jerusalem.
Joining us now is Pastor Robert Jeffries. Pastor, thanks so much for joining us. I'm very curious about your perspective. The Ukrainian church is largely represented by the Orthodox Christian religion. What is the message that you want to send to those people right now?
Well, I have just released an op-ed about how Christians should respond to this horrible evil we're seeing today in Ukraine. And I think in light of this kind of evil, all Christians, including the Christians in Ukraine, need to first of all remember that Vladimir Putin's evil is no match for God's sovereignty. Daniel 2 reminds us that God is the one who elevates kings and kingdoms and destroys kings and kingdoms. And in the final analysis, Vladimir Putin is no more than a piece of lint on the pages of history that God can flick away anytime he wants to. So God is at work even in times like this. Secondly, I think we need to realize that although the end is near, that doesn't mean the end is necessarily here. I don't think World War III and the end of the world starts tomorrow, but this is what Jesus called the beginning of birth pains. Nation shall rise up against nation. And as we see these things increase in intensity and frequency, we can know that the Lord is going to return. And the final thing I think we need to do is to recommit ourselves to praying for the innocent, like these victims in Ukraine and our Christian brothers and sisters. We need to pray for God's judgment against the guilty. And perhaps more than anything, we need to recommit ourselves to sharing the news of Jesus Christ with as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. That's the way Christians need to respond.
You know, I'm struck by that bit of news that the Ukrainian government has been providing weapons and ammunition to ordinary citizens. That means they're providing weapons and ammunition to Christians. I'm reminded of that old hymn I had to sing every morning at school as an elementary school kid, Onward Christian Soldiers. I think it's fallen out of favor because of political correctness in this day and age. But would you advise Christians in Ukraine to take up arms?
Absolutely. The Bible says that God cherishes the sanctity of human life, and that includes our own life and the life of our children and the life of our family members. And, Daniel 11:32 says, the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. And there's nothing wrong and there's everything right with standing on the foundation of righteousness and doing what you can to protect life, including your own life.
The freedom which Ukrainians so strive for and so desire is part and parcel of the Christian faith and the Bible, correct?
It absolutely is. And God created us to be free. And certainly at the core of our freedom is the freedom to worship God. And I've heard today from pastors in that area right now who are asking prayers of protection for the church right now. We need to be praying for our brothers and sisters in Christ. And we need to also realize that freedom is always going to be under attack, and we need to push back against those attacks, whether they come from Vladimir Putin or they even come from our own government. God made us free, and the basic freedom we have should be the freedom to worship Him. And Vladimir Putin is going to do everything he can to extinguish the Christian faith in Ukraine, but he is going to be unsuccessful in doing so.
Is the Christian faith compatible in any way, shape, or form with any form of totalitarianism?
No, not at all. Totalitarianism, Marxism, communism, whatever you want to call it, is built on a godless philosophy. God is replaced by the state, and we should absolutely have no allowance for that kind of teaching that was born in absolute atheism. And even here in our country, we're seeing the attempt to teach that doctrine, that godless doctrine, to our own children. We need to resist it every time we can, because what we're witnessing in Ukraine right now is the ultimate expression of the communist, the Marxist philosophy that leaves no room for the Creator.
Are there practical ways that Christians in the United States can lend a hand to those Ukrainians who are under siege right now, either through donations to charities or other means?
Yes, I think beyond praying, we can put feet to our prayers, and there are many wonderful Christian charities I know, like Samaritan Purse and other organizations that are doing relief work and seeking to get money to the right people. I would make sure you go through a Christian organization that is reputable so that the money will get to the people that it needs to get to. But I also think in a very practical way, we need to stand for freedom here in our country as well. Because the fact is, Martin Luther King Jr. said it best when he said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And we cannot allow ourselves to be isolationist and think, well, those poor Ukrainians, but that has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with us. Evil knows no geographical bounds. The same evil that has infiltrated Russia and is seeking to impose itself on Ukraine wants to destroy America, and most importantly, wants to destroy Christians. And we need to push back against every vestige of evil.
Pastor Jeffries, you make some great points there. I think it's really incumbent on Americans to truly understand the degree that creeping totalitarianism kind of sneaks up on us. We're all kind of the proverbial frog in the slowly boiling pot of water. We've seen this with what's going on with school boards. We've seen it with the truckers in Canada and how their bank accounts are being frozen. It happens one little incremental step at a time, and it's undergoing that change in the West. We hate to see it. Pastor Robert Jeffries, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Governor, back to you.
Thank you, Doug. For the people of Ukraine, this will be a day to remember. Not unexpected, but shocking nonetheless. Mothers and fathers, children and grandparents all witness to the horrors of war. Instead of looking up at the sun, today they were all looking to the sky for incoming missiles and warplanes with no good place to hide. Wars were supposed to be a thing of the past. We can only continue to pray that such a day will come. Right now, these are the moments that will stick in our head from today, February 24th, 2022. Good night.
Take your hand back from Ukraine. This is our message. Ukraine will resist. Ukraine will resist. Ukraine will
At the middle of the night, you are awake because everybody calls you that the bomb fell and there is fires everywhere and different places, even such were supposed not to be bombed, even Western Ukraine, right?
I'm heartbroken. I feel pain for my country. I feel pain for my family. There is no words to say. It's difficult. It's impossible to even imagine that something like that can happen in this world, in this century. It's horrible.